truth on my blade, every line's exploded. You swing your words, I counter with precision. Battle of reason, this is my mission. Raise your fist, let them know. No, raise your voice, let it blow. Woo! We clash our swords of reason. Cut through like no retreating. Yeah. No fear, no chain, no treason. Woo! We clash our swords of reason. We clash our swords of reason. Cut through like no...
Welcome everybody to Swords of Reason right here on the SpeakeaZy show, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and this is where logic meets passion. All right, so today's debate prompt is which Legend of Zelda game best represents the spirit of the franchise. And then we got today's debaters. On one side, we have Spiro Floropoulos, who has a channel right here on YouTube where he talks hot topic discussions and is known for his extensive breakdowns on the information of artificial intelligence. And on the other side here, we have EOD696, who also has a channel right here on YouTube. Where he focuses on hot topic discussions as well, politics, and occasionally some gaming. Spyro, whenever you're ready, I will start the timer up with your voice, and thank you both for being here tonight.
All right. So first of all, thanks to EOD, my worthy opponent, for being here. I really appreciate it. A special shout out to Speak. I think we would all agree these kinds of like debate topics are not, you know, the most eye-catching. You know, it's not the same thing as like, should you support Trump, you know, or something like that. It's not like that. But I think we can all agree that to some degree or another, we have a history of being nerds around here. And you've probably had a nerdy debate with somebody, and it's been about a video game or a TV show or a movie or something like this. So this is going to be not much different. As a matter of fact, EOD and I have agreed that we were going to take the gloves off, so to speak. We're going to come at each other. We are true nemesis, whatever the hell the word is, okay? And I have come prepared. I don't think you guys know how nerdy I am, but I have brought my master sword. I have it here. I've had it for a while. I don't really show this off because, well, I'm married, but still, this doesn't pull the chicks. You know, it's hard to keep my wife around on a daily basis. So I usually don't show it. Now, before we get started, I think it's fair for me to say that my opponent, EOD, is going to use Link to the Past. Link to the Past is an easy one to take a defense of as the best game that represents the franchise. And of course he would pick that because he needs to have the easy road out since he knows he's up against me, a master debater. Now let's have a look at another reason why EOD might really in particular love the Zelda series. So Speak, I'm going to put up this picture, and when you get a second, Speak, if you are okay with it, you can show this off. So right here, you can see that there's some connection here between EOD and Link, the hero of The Legend of Zelda. It is possibly the red hair. And it probably is because just like EOD, who is a ginger, he has no soul. He doesn't exist, just like Link doesn't exist in real life. Now, at the same time, EOD would love to be in Link's shoes because he could be checking out the nice booty of Zelda here. You can see that on the bottom right, but it's never going to happen, EOD. No matter how good you make a defense of Link to the Past today, it's simply not going to happen. Okay, so I wanted to, I'll remove it here. There we go. So we're back. All right. So there you go. So that's probably the primary reason why EOD loves playing Legend of Zelda. Now let's dig in a little deeper. Why would EOD like Link to the Past besides the fact that it's so easy to defend? Well, there's another reason. See, because I think deep down inside, EOD hopes that once he goes to the dark world, he would be a lot like the other men in Link to the Past who turn into monsters and flying creatures and super cool things. But unfortunately, EOD, you would just turn into one of those flowers that spews that like little poison thing, and then you just cut it down and it just goes away. You're just kind of a nuisance. So I'm sorry, EOD, but that's just kind of what would happen to you, okay? So I know you want to be like the other men, but it's just not going to happen, all right? Also, you would have to have a soul and exist, and you'd also have to have friends, and we know gingers don't have friends because they're not real. Now, let's get into my actual opening of this debate. Ladies, gentlemen, esteemed opponent, we're gathered here today not merely to debate which game is the most enjoyable, which game is the most, let's say, connective to you as an individual, but the one that is the definitive representation of an entire franchise spanning several decades. Now, EOD over here is going to say Link to the Past. It's foundational. He has a leg to stand on here. But a foundation is not a house. It's not a city. And so I'm going to be taking a different approach, and I'm going to be defending Tears of the Kingdom, the latest game that came out for Nintendo Switch. The idea is that Tears of the Kingdom is the only candidate that can possibly represent the entire franchise in a single game. It takes the entirety of the last 30 to 35 years. Almost every single Zelda game can be found inside Tears of the Kingdom in one form or another. Tears of the Kingdom does, by design, what Link to the Past did sheerly by being there first, which is no small thing, but it's still not the same thing. We have an entire set of mechanisms, storylines, characters, lore, and more that go back into history and reach into multiple Zelda games. Something that Link to the Past, unfortunately, because of its point in time, simply cannot do. Now, EOD is going to make a case that Link to the Past set things up for the future. And again, he might have a point here. But setting things up for the future is not the same thing as representing what is. And I would like to point your attention to the prompt itself. It's not which Zelda game best set up the future of the series, but which Zelda game best represents, in past terms, the franchise. And my argument here is going to essentially be what you've all been telling myself and EOD for the past few weeks, knowing that this debate has been coming up. I've actually received more comments about this debate than any other video or debate I've ever been on, to be quite honest with you. And you all have a variety of different games that you pick as the one that's most representative of the franchise. Some of you like Link to the Past. Some of you like Ocarina. Majora's Mask is a big one. Link's Awakening is a big one, etc., etc., etc. Now, here's the thing. These are games that represent the franchise for you. So I'm going to make the case that Tears of the Kingdom represents the franchise for everyone, because everyone is going to be able to find something in Tears of the Kingdom that they can connect to the game that they would choose. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's kind of like, take your favorite show and you want to pick one episode of an entire 3, 5, 10 season arc. Maybe you like Supernatural, or you like, I don't know, Smallville or Lost or whatever it is. Pick your show. And you have to pick one episode, and you have to sit somebody down in front of that episode, and that episode has to define for them what the show is. Or you take somebody who's a hardcore fan of the show, and you pick an episode that best represents at least something about the show that they like. And that really is where the crux is. For every individual person, whether you've played the game or not, your subjective experience of representation is not the same thing as what is the objective. And my case here is a plead to the prompt. I'm going to make the objective case that the term represent in the prompt means that it's the most representative to the most people, regardless of their actual peer-to-peer subjective differences of what represents the franchise. And therefore, I lay the groundwork for Tears of the Kingdom being that game. We have an entire history of lore that the game goes into, Tears of the Kingdom, that Link to the Past only briefly touches and not even that well. We have interviews by people at Nintendo, by people who actually worked in the development of the game, who also admit that they used Tears of the Kingdom as a way to represent multiple other games in the history of the franchise and pull them in together into one. On top of that, I'm going to make a case that I'm not going to lay out just yet. We're going to do it in the back and forth. I'm going to see what EOD has to say first. I want him to make his case for A Link to the Past, and then we'll get into it. But there's other things that exist in Tears of the Kingdom that represent something in the game that we've all taken for granted that I think very, very few people have paid attention to. And hopefully, I might throw a little curveball here. I call it my secret weapon that I've been holding back from EOD. So we'll see what happens here. But at the end of the day, all you have to do is remember that EOD is not real, because all you have to do is look at his hair. And that's it. I win the debate by that. I think I concede the rest of my time. Thank you. Thank you both.
All righty. Thank you for that opening statement, Spyro. And with that, we are going to hand the mic over to EOD. Whenever you're ready, I will start the timer up with your voice. And again, thank you both for being here.
Sorry, it echoes like a bitch when I try to do it without the headphones. I always forget that. Anyway, thank you so much for that opening, Spiro. You spent over half of it ruthlessly attacking me for being a minority, apparently. That's how we're going to fucking do this. So just to be absolutely clear, okay, I have been invited to the barbecue, okay, and I've been given the N-word pass. So just to let you guys know that that's who you're messing with when you try to go after my hair, okay? All right. First of all, there's that. Secondly, my opponent has foolishly tried to claim that one of the least Zelda-like games best represents the series. I mean, what does he say? He says that you want to show somebody a television show episode that best represents the show. Well, the reality is that games aren't shows, Spiro, okay? You racist ginger hater. Games are standalone events that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you expect to experience that when you sit down to play one. I don't sit down to a Final Fantasy expecting to see part of what happened in Final Fantasy 7 and part of what happened in Final Fantasy 10. Likewise, when I sit down to play a Zelda game, I have certain expectations. So I think it's extremely important before we move on in order to define what it is that makes a Zelda game in the first place, right? There's these several tropes that occur through all of the series right up until we get to Breath of the Wild. One of those is the blue candle, the lantern, right? This is something that ends up being taken over by this weird magic system that just sprouts up out of nowhere and makes no sense in the lore of Zelda, right? Another thing is our, your trusty bow and arrow. There's a whole weapons system in Breath of the Wild that gets introduced that has nothing to do with Zelda. And Zelda, grabbing the bow and arrow is an achievement along a linear, legendary pathway that takes you from being a nobody who maybe lives in a village somewhere, maybe your uncle died in the dungeon, maybe you're a forest child who's missing a fairy. Depends on the game, because each of the games is a different experience. But you start as a nobody and you work your way up to becoming the hero of Hyrule, saving the entire world. In Breath of the Wild, they threw all of that away. They took away all of the progression system. They took away all of the traditional Shinto and Christian and Buddhist teachings that generally occur within the series over time. And, I'm going to make the argument, rightfully so, that the greatest example of the tropes which define what Zelda is occurred in Link to the Past. The first iteration of Zelda was too limited by technology in order to actually fulfill the vision. But as Nintendo moved on into the Super Nintendo era, they found a plethora of new possibilities and new ways to sort of express what it is that we're trying to do in the first game. So the best representation of all of those concepts fomented directly within Link to the Past, and have never been beaten since, at least not on a console. As my opponent rightly pointed out, we did agree to limit this to the consoles. So I just want to make sure that that's perfectly clear, because when we get into some of the portable games, it's stuff that I haven't experienced and I don't think he's experienced. It's kind of hard to really quantify between the two of us. But looking at the consoles, in the top-down perspective, Link to the Past, definitely the best one. Also, there was a plethora of items and concepts of advancement, like I was saying, on this linear pathway to becoming a legendary hero. As you obtain more and more tools to help you achieve your goal, you feel yourself getting closer and closer to being something greater than you were when you began, right? And all of that advancement and all of that legendariness is just lost in the open world format. It's a beautiful game, don't get me wrong. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are absolutely gorgeous and fantastic tales, and they introduce all kinds of new species and new civilizations that we didn't know anything about, and they create this hierarchy and this history of Hyrule that never existed before. It's a great game, but it's not a Zelda game because it lacks all of the tropes. You had the hook shot was originally established in Link to the Past. You had the fire rod was originally established in Link to the Past, which appeared in game after game after game after the fact. You had the bug catcher net, which appeared in game after game. There's a whole bug collection system in Twilight Princess, harkening back to this. The Link to the Past establishes the two-tier advancement where you are introduced to dungeons in a small set, like 3, maybe 4, depending on the game, and then you advance into a larger set of more advanced dungeons that continue to challenge you, continue to add tools to your arsenal, and continue to present you with puzzles to, put all of these new mechanics as they occur into practice as you go along. And all of this is washed away in an instant in Tears of the Kingdom when you get your little magic pad that can glue shit together. And that's what you do in that game. You glue shit together. You make your own weapons. You build your own vehicles and your own methods of traversing this fantastical world. And like I say, it's a beautiful game. It's great. But is it Zelda? I don't think so. In my Zelda games, I have to get bottles. I have to go talk to a witch. I have to get a mushroom. I have to make a potion. I have to collect milk, right? In my Zelda game, I ride a horse, right? In Tears of the Kingdom, there's no reason to. You can just make a hover bike and fly around everywhere you want to go. That's not Zelda. How is that Zelda? So at the end of the day, what a lot of people say is that Ocarina of Time would have been their choice, right? When you look at the key components of Ocarina of Time, like I've said, the hook shot, the advancement from the 3 gems to the 5 medallions, the change between adult Link and child Link, all of those concepts are directly attributable to Link to the Past. And so many of them are iterated over again in Majora's Mask on N64 as well. You had the Zora's flippers that let you swim in Link to the Past. Well, you can put on a Zora mask in Majora's Mask and become a Zora. But does any of this happen in Tears of the Kingdom? Nope. In fact, Zora's kingdom and Tears of the Kingdom is frozen over, as it so often is, given the trope. But the way that you have to unfreeze it is by defeating some type of divine mechanistic spirit. Where the fuck did that come from? Is that Zelda? I don't think so. So I will iterate again and again that Tears of the Kingdom is a great game. It's fantastic and it's beautifully presented. But I don't think it's a Zelda game. And if we want to look at what began, as my opponent so rightly points out, what is the foundation of the tropes that define Zelda as we look at it, in Memoria, all of those started with Link to the Past. And to this day, it remains a great playable game for people who know nothing about Zelda, know very little about Super Nintendo. You can have a good time playing Link to the Past. I promise. Give it a shot. Put it on an emulator. Get it on your phone. You won't regret it. It's a fucking trip. But to further address the racist and misogynistic allegations that have occurred against my gingerness, I'll say that Spiro is a silly Canadian, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, they don't even get proper Zelda up there. Okay, like it's just like with bacon, right? We get real bacon, they get ham. We get real Zelda, they get like some imported Japanese shit that it doesn't even work right. That's why he couldn't pick Super Nintendo, because they don't have a working Super Nintendo in all of Canada. That's really what it is. Okay. I see the rest of my time.
All righty. Thank you for that opening statement, EOD. Now we're going to get over into the 5-minute uninterrupted rebuttals. So we're going to hand the mic back to Spyro. And whenever you're ready, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Well, after having spent a night with EOD's maternal progenitor, it was a wild fortnight tryst. She bequeathed to me some knowledge, whereupon she stated that EOD loves to pretend like he's Link on a daily basis. Unfortunately for both her and I, he won't do the one thing that Link does do, which is shut the hell up and not talk. Moving on, there are a few things that EOD has already betrayed himself on. For example, he confused the concept of Zora's Domain and what happened to it between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The Zora's Domain was not frozen in Tears of the Kingdom. And furthermore, it was frozen in Ocarina of Time, which means it's not the only game where Zora's Domain was frozen. It is therefore canonically and historically consistent. Furthermore, you brought up the fire rod, as if to say that it existed only in Link to the Past. However, it did also exist in Zelda. It was used with a book to shoot fire. So you don't even know your own history. How can you possibly hope to even be remotely close to the Chad that is Link, aside from just keeping your mouth shut, as you should? Now, I will cede this much, though, to EOD. Everything he said about Canada was 100% right. He's totally right about that. There's just no... I think Speak can agree with me. Okay, so there you go. All right, so that's it. EOD wins that portion of the debate. However, what he's also missing is something that is consistent with far-right, flat earth conservatives these days, which is the conservative view of the entire concept that everything must stay the way it is. But what he's forgetting is the history of what is not. Link to the Past broke several tropes that existed in games before it. When you play Zelda 1 and you're in the overworld on the Nintendo version, you're traveling around the overworld in a very open world format. Link to the Past doesn't really give you that same concept. It broke that trope. One could say adapted it perhaps, but it definitely didn't do it in consistency with the previous games. Same with the use of several other weaponry or mechanics that existed previous to it. And as you move forward through each game does consistently push boundaries on what a typical Zelda game is. In fact, I would flip the argument on its head. The point of every single Zelda game was to break boundaries, was to break previous tropes. And there are certain things that must stay consistent, I can agree, in order to make a Zelda game, but they're not what my opponent is bringing out. Here's an example of something that you would agree, if it were removed from any Zelda game, would not be a Zelda game anymore. The Master Sword. If it just didn't exist in a game, you'd be like, what the hell is a Zelda game? If Zelda didn't even exist in a Zelda game, you might be scratching your head. But if a bow and arrow don't exist in the game, why? Can you give me a reason why? What's the lore behind it aside from it was in the other games before? That's it. Whereas the Master Sword has a reason to be there. Zelda has a reason to be there. Link has a reason to be there. If you remove Ganon from the game, you're also kind of wondering what the hell's going on with the game. Where's Ganon? Where's the Triforce? Things like that. There are certain elements that can be removed, which only can be removed because of exactly the reason EOD is bringing up here, which is just they were in there before. Tears of the Kingdom does a first by making certain elements, which I'm not going to have time to get into, I guess, now, but we'll get into it in back and forth. Tears of the Kingdom is one of the first games that actually brings to the forefront the lore of some of the reasons why you can't extract certain elements like the Master Sword from a Zelda game and still call it a Zelda game. But no game presents a lore for the fire rod or the bow and arrow or the boots. Again, where were the boots in Ocarina of Time that were the same as the boots in Link to the Past? They were not the same thing, etc., etc. There are certain things you can do. There's wiggle room in these games that still make it a Zelda game. And that would be where my source of contention is, as it seems he wants to stick to the definition of what is a Zelda game. But I still contend with the fact that you can have your cake and eat it too with Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom gives you essentially every core element that makes any Zelda game a Zelda game that you cannot remove from any Zelda game, and provides you the reason why you can't do it, and is therefore the most representative of all Zelda games.
All righty. Thank you for that rebuttal, Spyro. And with that, we're going to hand over the mic back to EOD. And whenever you're ready for your rebuttal, I'll start the timer up with your voice.
All right, yeah, no, I was not confusing what happened in Breath of the Wild versus Tears of the Kingdom. I know that it was frozen, and I know that that is canonical with what happened in Ocarina of Time. When I brought up the fire rod, it was an example of items being carried over from LTTP. So you gotta just prove my point there. The other thing is, you said Zelda 1 had other weaponry and mechanics that LTTP didn't exactly illustrate very well. I'd love to know what those were. The reality is that everything that was either missing or changed between the two games was because of the technological limitations of the original NES, right? And LTTP was just a better overall vision of what they were trying to accomplish. You're saying that each game pushes boundaries as we advance through the series. To a certain extent, this is correct, but primarily on the technological level, as I just iterated with LTTP versus the original LOZ. Okay, and even then, from LTTP on to Ocarina of Time, the big difference was really the technology and what was being done in terms of graphics and in terms of presentation. Rather, the lore was still very much kind of set and fixed. Not only that, but the format, the gameplay loop was still very much the same as it was in the original game. In the original game, one of the flaws was that they didn't really prevent you from going somewhere you shouldn't be too early, right? Although they did tell you what level you were on. As soon as you entered the level, you knew that, oops, I just walked into stage 8. Maybe I shouldn't be here. That was about the most amount of guidance that you got. In LTTP, they did a lot more to guide the player on a linear adventure, again, from that nobody to that hero of the world progression. And the items and how you obtain those items, such as the bow and arrow, was a key part of that. And as you obtain each of these items, you progress in ability and in difficulty and in skill requirement as you progress through the game. All of that is absent from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because everything is given to you on a silver platter right up at the beginning of the game. Like I said, it has some fantastic storytelling elements in it. And it uses the tropic characters such as Princess Zelda in Ganondorf. However, the way that they present Ganondorf as some kind of otherworldly demon, which is somewhat, he was like a giant pig in the original LOZ, and he was reiterated as a giant pig in LTTP. Okay, so that's actually consistent between those two games. But as he's presented in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, he's some kind of just weird fucking god thing. Like, we don't know what he is. That's kind of weird, and that just doesn't seem like Zelda. The other thing is that well, okay, I guess I'll have to concede that the personality of Zelda does fit with the personality of Sheik in Ocarina of Time, so I'll give you that. However, the way that Ganon is presented, we have these weird mechanisms of the spirits that are some kind of big mechanical devices that need to be traversed and solved instead of dungeons. The floating islands, and the whole weapon system where, you hit somebody 3 times and it breaks in your hand. This shit is not Zelda at all in any way whatsoever. And then as you branch off into all of these different civilizations and new species and new people in Breath of the Wild and in Tears of the Kingdom, you find stuff that's been invented out of thin air that it's not consistent. There are some things that are consistent. The Gorons are there, the Zoras are there, but there's been a whole lot of stuff added that was never necessary before, and I would argue isn't necessary now. in order to make what we would consider to be a good Zelda game. Again, in order to define what Zelda is, you have to look at what Zelda has been, and that's why the foundation matters. As we know, when you build any kind of house. So if you build a shaky foundation, if you betray that foundation and overextend beyond what it can support, the thing falls apart. And that's, I think, what we're seeing happen with Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. Now, does it expose people to the IP? Absolutely. It's a very well-selling game, and it's very well presented, but it is not a good representation of what makes Zelda Zelda. I mean, that's ultimately it. So I'll cede my time after that.
All righty. Thank you for that rebuttal. With that, we're going to get over into the hour of open floor back and forth.
Let's try and go through these things one thing at a time. We'll go back and forth here. Obviously, so you bring up Ganon and the pig.
Yep.
Have you played Ocarina of Time?
Yeah. He's a man.
Yes. From where?
The desert.
Which desert
Gerudo
specifically?
Valley.
Gerudo
The
Valley.
one desert there is. That's the desert.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I want to make sure that you're actually a true Zelda fan, or you're not just like, oh, there's a
for
desert
fuck's sake.
biome. So it's like, it's not like you're just playing.
Well, I
Minecraft
have
and
demonstrated my dedication to the series on my own stream. Feel free to check it out. It's EOD696 at YouTube.
Okay.
I've been doing a lot of playthroughs all month. So
So you'd have to then agree that there's a lore that Ocarina of Time presented as to the history of like where Ganon comes from. He comes from the desert. He's a male Gerudo. And there's the lore is that it's very rare for a male Gerudo to appear. I believe it only happens every X number of years. I can't remember how many it is. But that's the lore behind it. So to see Ganon in that form is actually very much in line with the lore. So where is this coming from that Ganon in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom is weird?
Right. Because he's like this big web fucking otherworldly spirit thing that's like
and he's been a pig, and he's been Aghanim. He's been an entirely different person before.
No, that's not true. Okay, he's not Aghanim, whatever, the stupid wizard at the end of LTTP. That's a different dude who was trying to raise Ganon. Okay, so nah. Now, was Ganon in spirit form? Was Ganon in spirit form? Yes. However, when he was, manifest in the world, he was one of two things. He was this boar-like creature, which he turned into in Ocarina of Time in the second phase of the boss battle, if you don't recall.
Yeah. I remember, yeah.
Or he was the evil man.
Yeah.
So in Breath of the Wild, he's like some like tree root system or some shit that's like taking over everything. It's fucking weird.
So you draw the line. You're okay with him being pig-like, but you draw the line at him being anything else. Like, say, I can't remember the name of the character in Twilight, where he was basically that guy.
No, in Twilight Princess, he was Ganondorf, the man that we saw in Ocarina of Time. Actually, he was the same dude. Now, the guy you're thinking of, the Dark King in Twilight Princess. You see, I'm way better at this anyway. Zant.
Zant. Okay, yeah, that's right.
Zant was a different dude, and again, Zant played the role out of LTTP of whatever his name is, the wizard. Aghanim. Yeah.
Aghanim, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to be clear then that your kind of contention here is that Ganon cannot be anything but Ganon the man and a pig. That's your contention.
Some sort of boar-like creature. Yes.
Okay, so here's why I fundamentally disagree with that. The entire lore, which I'm sure you're going to bring up, you've already brought up some of the history, the story behind it, etc. The entire lore of the Legend of Zelda, in terms of the franchise itself, speaks to highlights and overtones as the primary mechanism upon which to tell that lore. So, for example, do you know that the Triforce is not in every Zelda game?
Well, which ones are you talking about?
So, I'm asking if you know that it's not in every Zelda game.
I think that there are some of the portable ones that maybe it's not in there. And then there's some spin-off ones that don't even center around Link or the primary story.
Right. How about Majora's Mask?
Oh, well, yeah, there's that one too. So
how about Ocarina of Time?
That's a spin-off. What are you talking about? There is a Triforce in Ocarina of Time.
Where?
What? Okay, so there are three people who possess the Triforce in Ocarina of Time: Princess Zelda, Ganon, and Link.
Yeah.
Uh,
And where is that Triforce? Yes. True.
it's
So
like
far, so good. Where is it?
in their wrists.
It's in them, right? It's
Yeah.
part of them. And what does what does the Triforce represent? What are the three symbolisms of the Triforce? The words that are associated with the three parts of the Triforce.
Din, Pharaoh, and what's the other one? I forget.
I believe you're talking about the goddesses who created the Triforce or who created the world. I'm talking about the actual words that are associated, like the characteristics of each portion of the Triforce.
Oh, courage, power, and wisdom.
Correct. And
Yeah.
Ocarina of Time set the groundwork for something that was typically a very core component of what would be the Legend of Zelda franchise, which is the Triforce. In Link to the Past, you literally go get it. It's a thing that you go get.
Yeah.
But
That's
my
true.
point is that there's
Likewise, that's
tone.
true in the original Zelda as well, which means
That's
Link to
true.
the Past is a good representation of the original lore.
That's sure, yes. But there's a tone that's being set here, which is that the Triforce is not always a thing. The Triforce has a deeper symbolism, much like you already mentioned in, I believe it was your opening, where you brought up the Shinto Christian background. There is symbolism that overpowers a lot of the specificities of the game.
And that symbolism
Symbolism
appeared in the original game. It
Ganon
appeared in
is
LTDP.
power.
It appeared in Ocarina of Time. It did not appear in Breath of the Wild or the Tears of the Kingdom.
Which symbolism?
It was
did not
mysteriously
appear?
absent. The
Which one?
Symbolism of Christianity, for instance.
There's a church. Literally, when you start off in your opening stuff, when you talk to the king in Breath of the Wild, you're in a church.
It's abandoned or some shit, isn't it?
So
Well, that's not a church. That's the ruins of a
not
church.
Oh, so any abandoned church is not a church. So any existing church today that people, that's out there that nobody goes into, it's no longer a church.
Well, it's more than just a church in
Yes.
Ocarina of Time and in LTDP and in the original game. In the original game, his shield literally has a cross on it. In in LTDP, there's a book which sort of represents. It looks like the Bible. I think you got another one of those in the original game as well. In Ocarina of Time, there was a shield. The mirror shield had like a Muslim thing on it. The point is that Zelda as a cultural bridge between the West and Japan often looked at Western religion as with a fond eye, but as later instances of it developed, they tried to work that out of the series, and I think it is most absent from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, thanks to woke bullshit and Nintendo trying to kowtow to activist motherfuckers.
Okay. Would you state that one of the core tenets of the Christian backing is self-sacrifice, or the sacrifice of oneself towards a higher goal?
Absolutely.
Would you say that a cross represents that more, or a person actually doing a sacrifice represents that more?
I think that both are representative of that aspect of our faith.
Which one's more representative?
Well, I feel like people making sacrifices goes unnoticed a lot more than the symbolism of Christianity.
But which one actually represents the act of self-sacrifice more? Is it me doing this, or is it me actually sacrificing my life for you?
Well, if you're trying to perform an exorcism, like that might actually accomplish
Well, I
something,
can't for you. You'd have to have a soul for that. It's not possible.
No, that's so funny. That's so funny. Okay, look, I recognize that. Okay, so that's great that you bring that up, because I feel like that's another the linear legendary story aspect is something that I've been criticizing about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The open world kind of does away with a lot of that. So the sacrifice and the development that represents coming to Christ and being a better person, I think is better represented in previous iterations that were more adherent to that format, right? Does that make sense? So it was more obvious that Link was growing and becoming more capable as you went through the game, because the way the progression system was all very much hinging on these specific items and these specific dungeons that you have to go to in a somewhat specific order.
Sure. Okay, but we're not talking about the progression. We're talking about the symbolism here, because you brought up the notion of there were actual crosses on the previous games, which tied far closer to Christianity. And that's what I'm trying to bring attention to, is that the symbolism hasn't gone away. The symbolism,
Yes.
the ultimate form of those symbols, the self-sacrificing, all of that, I can point to many instances in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom where that self-sacrificing spirit is actually core to the principle of the game, as it has
Great.
been in every
Then
previous.
give us one example. You keep saying that I have all these examples, but then you never actually provide any. So let's
Yeah.
hear one.
Princess Zelda literally killed herself in Tears of
No,
the
she didn't.
Kingdom. Yes,
That's
she did.
bullshit. No, she didn't.
Yep.
She did not. She teleported or something.
Nope.
Okay. Well, the game's not about Zelda, so that you missed one right there. It's supposed to be Link making the sacrifices and growing as a human being, right?
When
'Cause that's
when
a
has Link
protagonist, that's who
made
you are.
when has Link made the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice of death? In
Like
any
every
game.
time I've run out of fucking hearts.
It's a wonder you beat any of the games. If we could tally it up, I mean, how many games have you actually beat? Yeah. Okay.
I would say that Link sacrificed his life. He sacrificed his childhood in Ocarina of Time, right? So
Okay.
there's that. But in Link to the Past, he sacrificed his uncle and his would-be life. He's put everything on hold in order to become this grand adventurer. It just landed in his lap. And so I think this element is actually prevalent in every single entry in the series. But
You're right. When we're talking about the core tenets of self-sacrifice in Christianity, right? Jesus also put his childhood on hold, and he definitely sacrificed his uncle too, making him the perfect paradigm of self-sacrifice. However, unfortunately for you, that's not the case. What is the case is that Zelda sacrificed herself many times.
The game's not about Zelda. Is a complete red herring.
What I'm pointing to, we're focused on a symbolism. We narrowed down to one kind of symbolic thing. You brought up Christianity, and that's what I'm narrowing on, right? There's a sense of self-sacrifice there.
So
there's consistency.
If you want to look for that in the other games, it's all over them. That's what
It
I'm trying
is
to tell you.
exactly. Therefore, Tears of the Kingdom is not a betrayal of, in terms of that one thing alone. It's not a betrayal.
That one thing, but you haven't done anything to address any of the criticisms that I've brought up so far.
So now that I've completely demolished you on this one, let's move on to the next one. What's another criticism?
You haven't demolished me. You haven't demolished anything.
Yeah, all right.
All you've done is say that because Zelda sacrificed herself, that's Christ-like. And it's like, okay, that one thing, sure, maybe. But the symbolism isn't there, and the overarching,
But the symbolism is there. The
No, hold on. Let me finish my fucking thought. Hold on. Okay. So the symbolism isn't there. And the other thing is that the spirituality of it is all extremely, how do we say this? Is pagan, right? It's about like these gods that float in the sky and are big giant mechanisms that you have to go in and solve like a big puzzle or something. It has nothing to do with Christianity. It completely turns away from that.
Hang on, you said that was pagan, right? Like, yeah, you were okay.
Like not Christian.
Okay, so what's the difference between killing a demon in a game versus going up to the sky and killing some bosses, or going to a temple on the ground? Like, why does the destination or the location of these things matter? What makes it pagan versus not pagan?
Okay, well, because we're not talking about a one true God looking over a world down below where people are expected to be, moral and try to be Christ-like. We're talking about this world that's governed by forces unknown that represent aspects of God's power rather than God himself. So it's not compatible with our Christian worldview.
Sure, but the canonical, like actual history of Zelda is that the world was created by several gods. There's nothing more pagan than that.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. But even in these earlier iterations of the story, we still found more commonality in terms of the way the story was presented and the iconography that we see. So that's why
so so I can give you some common ground here, because I would agree that in terms of visualizing what the actual symbolism of certain things. So for example, you could throw this at me and say this about the Triforce, right? If I'm going to make a case about the Triforce having a symbolic kind of representation of certain, ideas, then, the Triforce, in terms of iconography, as you point out, in the first few games, there's definitely a far more lean into those those icons. But my argument is not the iconography. My argument is the representation of the franchise as a whole, because as the prompt says, it's the entirety of the franchise. And if you're going to make the case,
Well, you've already pointed out
that.
You've already pointed out that there's only one instance where you can find of self-sacrifice that's sufficient for you, and that's Tears of the Kingdom, right? Where Zelda sacrifices herself.
Well, because it's the one that's most consistent, and it's the ultimate sacrifice of oneself through your own actions. That's
so why is that a unique element within the story there, right? You see what I'm saying?
Correct. That's my point. It's not a unique element. It's pointing to the consistency of Tears of the Kingdom not betraying the canonical history or the symbolism that's been representative of the entire franchise.
Well, what I mean is if it was, then we would see self-sacrifice more often in the series than we do. I can think of some instances of it happening in other ways, but Link's uncle being one, he sacrificed himself. Okay.
Sure.
But beyond that, there's not a lot of that actually happening. And again, I point to this as a bridge between Western and Japanese culture. It's not, Zelda's not necessarily a Christian story, right? Like that was never really my claim. But the fact that we had some commonality in the way it's presented in the iconography, again, was more prevalent in these earlier games. Now, you can say that, okay, Zelda making that sacrifice in Tears of the Kingdom was more Christ-like and perhaps a better thing for a Christian character to do. But again, is that Zelda? I mean, so I guess we're talking past each other, because you're talking about what is more Christ-like, and I'm talking about what brings Christians to the franchise, I guess.
Why can't it be both? That's my argument. Is that if you're going to make the case
there's not a Bible in the Tears of the Kingdom, a book with a cross on it. There's not a shield with a cross on it. There's not, you said there was a church, but the church is abandoned. Instead, it should be, an upstanding church, as it is in LTTP, one that has a congregation in it later in the game, right? So.
Okay, again, you're focused on the iconography, and I'm focused on the symbolism that is the story, the lore that is being presented, the core components throughout the franchise. And what other game has a stand-up church aside from Link to the Past?
Well, it could be argued that the Temple of Time in Ocarina of Time is very church-like, especially standing on the outside of it. It looks like a cathedral.
Sure, but then so is the one in Breath of the Wild. That argument works for me as well.
Well, then that only applies to Ocarina of Time, insofar as it reaches back to the roots of the series, right?
Right.
So you're falling a little short there.
I mean, perhaps a little, I can give you that. But the point is that the iconography is not the only thing that you look at to see what makes a Zelda game. Exactly to your point. Like, you can have your cake and eat it too. The church doesn't have to exist in order for you to get Christian themes out of Zelda. You don't have to have a bow and arrow to get the mechanisms, the enjoyment of beating a puzzle, whether it's underground, above ground, in the sky, in the ocean, etc.
But the fact that you're presented with a puzzle that you can't beat until you have a bow and arrow, again, adds to the sense of accomplishment and the sense of advancement throughout the story, which again has been a staple since the beginning. For certain levels in the original Zelda, you had to have certain items such as a bow and arrow, such as the candle or whatever, in order to actually proceed through the dungeon itself, and that continues throughout much of the series. Again, until you come to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, where it's all about, having the stupid glue stuff and enough tools to actually build a mechanism to solve the puzzle, which is sometimes kind of sillily obtuse. Like, it's one of the Breath of the Wild criticisms that I've heard a lot is that the dungeons suck.
Well, and I can actually agree that in Breath of the Wild the dungeons suck. I would say in Tears of the Kingdom they're much better, but there's a reason for that. But in order for me to kind of make that argument, Isn't
there only 4 of them in Tears of the Kingdom? Did I read that right?
So there's the sages, and then there's the boss battles. So in Tears of the Kingdom, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and then you have the shrines, which is there's like 150 or something.
Those don't count. Those are like mini games, but.
So to me, they count, but in a different way. But we'll save that. So, would you agree? Let's maybe kind of go back just a little bit. Let's put aside the symbolism, the Christian, stuff just for a moment, would you agree that for the most part, the Zelda games, maybe not every single one, but I would say a majority of them, when they come out, they push the boundaries of what makes a game a game. So as an example, I can point to Link to the Past, and I can say that if you looked at games before Link to the Past that were like top-down 2D kind of, adventure RPG-like games, they never really quite matched up to Link to the Past. Link to the Past sets the tone, and then moving forward, you have top-down 2D games that kind of mimic a lot of what came out of Link to the Past. Same with Ocarina of Time, I would say. I kind of set the road, which goes to your argument, of like 3D games, right? It really pushed the boundaries of the hardware, etc. So there's a history, I think, of games, Zelda games, historically doing that.
What I'll say to try to expound on this a little bit is to say that it's not the lore that's changing from each of these games to make.
I'm not talking about lore. Yeah,
I know. It's specifically technology and the way that gameplay is sort of affected. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So if all other things for a moment being equal, then it would also make sense that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which now I'm going to bring it forward to the argument that you're making here, which is the gluing of the things together, building stuff, the tablet, certain elements, etc. There is something to be said about the fact that previous Zelda games have historically introduced mechanics that were made available by the nature of the hardware and software that was capable at the time that didn't exist in previous games. Ocarina of Time being 3D being one, as an example.
Right. Well, okay, but they didn't abandon the format and the formula of that. Get an item, advance through the story, advance in capability, this growth element along a linear timeline, a linear pathway that goes from being a nobody to becoming the hero of the world, right? Instead, in Tears of the Kingdom, I think it's much more wide open, and so much is presented to you at your fingertips right from the start that sense of advancement is sort of washed, if you know what I mean, or pales in comparison. We'll say. Okay. It's not as important of an aspect in that game as it had been in previous iterations. Just put it that way.
Okay, so we would have to put the technological thing aside, and maybe we can even agree that the game's definitely pushed forward the technological capabilities and set standards.
I can see that. It's definitely an advancement in technology, for sure.
Okay. So I would argue that once again, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are consistent with that, which goes to the technical aspect of the things you're bringing up. But let me address your criticism here of the actual concept of you're a nobody and you end up being the hero. The idea of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is that they throw you in there with nothing. And in fact, I would argue that, again, you should flip the script on its head. Instead of giving you a linear path to becoming someone, they don't tell you which path you should take. In fact, there is no one path you ought to take.
Exactly. That's the problem.
Okay.
So that makes it not a Zelda game. When we look at Zelda historically, that has always been the case in just about every single game. Now, can you approach things from a certain perspective? Can I go to Jabu Jabu before I go to, Mount Doom?
Yeah.
I mean, technically, yes. But there's a very limited sort of way in order to accomplish that. For instance, the tiering of the dungeons that I was talking about in LTTP, which set that precedent for Link to the Past and for, following iterations even past that one. What was I going to say? You get 3 dungeons in the beginning. Then you have to collect these medallions, and then you go to the Dark World, and there's like 7, and you need all 7 in order to open the final area in order to get up to the boss. So there's a clear tiered progression system that sort of blocks your progress along the way. But as you go through each one of these dungeons, you get more stuff, get more capabilities. It clearly leading up to the final climax of the final battle with the final boss. Right?
Okay. So there's 2 things that then I would argue back with. One is that those elements are still there in terms of linearity. It's just that the linearity is not what you think it is. The linearity is the point from you being nothing to you being a hero.
That's makes just a matter of gathering materials, right? I mean, that's all
right.
That is.
So if you remove that,
that's not Zelda.
If you remove the idea of gathering materials, could Link still be a hero?
Within the Switch games?
Any game.
I don't know what you're asking. What do you
So
mean?
if you like eliminated the idea of like the fire rod, it was gone. Could Link still be a hero?
Well, I suppose. What do you get?
What if you did it? What if you did it for the bow and arrow, etc.? And you can continue this line of questioning, right?
Okay, so
we would have
no,
to give-
I think at some point, okay, once you take away all of these things that have made the series what it is,
yeah.
right? It's no longer a Zelda game. So
Okay. Is it the
now,
thing?
can we mix and match? Can we take some things out? Can we move some things in? Not all the
Yes.
Zelda games have done all of the same items. However, there have been
Right.
staples of the series which have remained consistent since LTTP, which again is why I think LTTP is most representative of the series, such as the hook shot, such as the lantern, such as the bug net, so on and so forth. I went through a lot of these examples already, but there's
Yes,
a plethora
you did.
of items
Yeah.
in the progression, the item progression there that have remained part of the series since LTTP.
Yes. Now I agree with you.
Those are what I would consider to be core items that need to be there in order for it to be a real Zelda game, right?
Okay.
And again, they'd have to be used in a way to progress through that linear
Right. They have to be a component. Yes. Okay. So
to the progression.
here's right for the progression. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but here's the problem. First of all, the games don't agree with you. You already conceded that these are things that you could remove some portions of them, or that have actually been canonically changed within the
Well,
history.
because my argument is not absolute doesn't mean that the games don't agree with me. Yes, in fact, the games do agree because, as I've said, several of these items have been in the series since LTTP.
So
right?
if I went back in time, like I said, and I removed any number of these items, at what point does Link no longer have the capability to become a hero? Can you set that definition for me? Because I can, but I don't think you can.
I'm really unsure how you're defining hero. Can Link be Link? Should be the question. And
Sure.
At some point, no, there's a threshold where Link is no longer Link because he lacks the elements that make him Link. Does that make sense?
It
Right.
does. What are those?
Okay, so again, the hook shot, the boots, let's see, different tunics that he can wear. The fact that he's going after the 3 pendants and then the 7 crystals, that there's a tiered system there. That's part of the progression that he always goes through. The lamp, right? Even the Bombo's fucking medallion, you could say, from Link to the Past is represented by the bomb bracelet and Ocarina of Time. So it's those types of concepts, right?
Okay. So, but here's everything that you're bringing up. Instead of you're looking at it as they were key components to what made Link Link in any given game. Yeah. My argument is that they were key components to the environment in which Link found himself in. And the reason why Link became a hero is because he adapted to those environments. The environment gave him those things.
That's part.
Except for one thing.
The games don't agree with you. What's that?
The Master Sword. Take the Master Sword away, you no longer have Link.
No, it has to be more than that. Anyone can wield a sword, right?
Nope.
That I would say that is probably one of the most important things.
Can anyone wield the Master Sword?
I would say that was one of the most important things, but I wouldn't say that that's the one thing that defines who Link is. Link is the Batman of the feudal fantasy world. Okay,
sure.
And he has this belt and this inventory full of contraptions that allow him to interact with the environment in different ways, and a lot of times. But without that utility belt, if he just has a sword, he's not Link. He's not Hulk.
It's not the utility belt that matters. That's my point.
Yes,
you can have the utility belt, but the utility belt changes based upon the environment which Link finds himself in. So he adapts to the utility belt. But one thing that is consistent that makes Link Link is his unique ability to wield the Master Sword. That is the most consistent thing that I would say you could make an argument for that must exist to make Link Link. All these other things, they don't have to exist in and of themselves. Something has to exist to allow Link to be able to execute his mission, but they don't have to be every single time. It's got to be a hook shot. It's got to be a bow, etc.
It does have okay. There are certain aspects of these elements, and these elements themselves are imperative in my opinion. But there are aspects of these elements that do not change, even if the name of it changes or the style of it changes a little bit. Okay, the hook shot has been the hook shot since LTTP, right? The magic hammer has been the magic hammer since LTTP. There's these gauntlets that you get in Ocarina of Time that it's clearly claim out of LTTP, which allow you to pick up really, really, really heavy stuff. But okay, so if the Master Sword is the single thing that defines Link as Link, then why is it that I can build a weapon that is much more powerful than the Master Sword in what is it, Tears of the Kingdom, way before I'm even supposed to be able to get the Master Sword, before the Master Sword's even been rebuilt or whatever?
Because there is literally no weapon that can defeat Ganon at the end.
Yeah,
you can't escape that.
Well,
therefore, it is. Sorry,
that means I said that's a MacGuffin. That means that your whole definition of Link depends upon a MacGuffin that inexorably ties him to his mortal enemy Ganon, right?
Yes, that's the story. Yeah, that's the whole point. These three are tied together forever. Anytime that Ganon shows up, you must have the other two, and the only way to defeat Ganon is always the Master Sword.
So, would you say that it is pretty cheap and chintzy to create? Let's take the case just for a moment as a digression. Okay, take the case of Super Mario Brothers 2, where they took a game that was not Super Mario Brothers, and then they reskinned it. They added a couple of key elements and said, now this is a Super Mario Brothers game, right? So it doesn't that make for a cheap imitation of what Super Mario Brothers should have been?
I could see your point there. Are you saying that Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild do that?
Yes, I'm saying that they do that to a large extent, and what you're pointing out, rightfully so, are the key story elements that they were able to include and incorporate in order to try to get away with calling it a Zelda game. But at the end of the day, there are too many elements that are foreign. There are too many elements that gameplay core mechanics that are just so completely different. It's no longer a Zelda game. Okay, so and I keep going back to this, but just the sheer number of items and weapons that you can gather up and mix and match together, even if we're not even thinking about the whole building aspect that Tears of the Kingdom introduced, that makes it a whole different world and a whole different progression system. As you said, the way you progress is by gathering stuff and making more powerful armor, weapons, and mechanisms to help you traverse the world and solve puzzles. But that core element of the linear legendary pipeline and how the items sort of hook into that progression is missing. And I think that's what makes them not Zelda games and not very representative of the series. So I don't think you address that at all. You keep trying to wind us down a different road. But
well, so my point here is that I think you're wrong. I think that it is representative. It's just that you're looking at it from your perspective, which is, how do I enjoy playing Zelda games?
That's not it at all. What I've done is I've looked at the history of the series and I've said, this is the thing that is consistent from game to game to game to game up until we get to Breath of the Wild.
And I'm questioning why it must be consistent for that to be a Zelda game when you have so many other games that break their own consistency like that.
They don't, though. Okay, so no other game has introduced the weapon system, for instance, that exists in Breath of the Wild. Can we agree on that?
Sure.
No other game has introduced a cooking system like Breath of the Wild, where you gather ingredients and make dishes and stuff like that. I mean, we're talking about Zelda.
One game. Yeah, I think there might have been one game that did something close, but not exactly like that. And I might be off on that one, so don't quote me on that.
Not to the scale, at least, we'll say. The scale and complexity and importance with which...
Sure, but I don't think the cooking mechanism in and of itself is foreign. Okay. And as a matter of fact, even the building system, because you're probably going to bring up the building system where you glue things together. I believe, Wind Waker maybe, or there was a game where you could actually build some kind of craft or something like that. I didn't play it. I had to look it up, but that's also not foreign.
There's one on DS where you build a boat. Maybe that's what you're talking about.
It might be. It might be the one I'm thinking of.
Phantom Hourglass.
It could be. Yeah.
Even in that, okay, it's more like customizing a car than it is, constructing something out of raw materials, right?
Okay. So Zelda has never adapted a mechanism that existed before and made it
My
different.
point
for a
is
different
is
game?
that is that these ideals are so hopelessly foreign and game breaking for what defines a Zelda game. As a, you know, I've already gone over that. That these don't. They're great games. Okay, like don't get me wrong. I don't begrudge them selling as well as they've done or anything like that. I think they look fantastic. They're fantastic games. It's not Zelda, you know, it's something else. And they shoehorned Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf in there and said that's the new Zelda game. That's what I
So
feel like.
you think that they built the game around the mechanics?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, to some extent. And you know, that wouldn't even be that strange for Zelda developers. I think they built a lot around the Ocarina and Ocarina of Time. I think they built a lot around, you know, the waving of the sword in that one for Wii. But
okay. So
that core legendary
is
gameplay was still there, though. That ladder was still there.
in Ocarina of Time. Was it there in
Yeah.
Ocarina of Time? Yeah.
Absolutely
And
it
it
was.
wasn't there in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom.
I think it was hopelessly missing because they depended on you to explore the open world, to gather raw materials, and then sort of progress that way. As you iterated, you start with nothing and you gather things and you build cooler shit as you go. That's a totally different gameplay loop than every other Zelda.
Okay. So here's my problem with this. You're constantly looking at the thing and you're missing the bigger picture. That's why I'm stepping away from like the specific things you're bringing up, because the core of these things has always existed in every game. There's a core element to the Zelda franchise, which is push boundaries and introduce new mechanisms or introduce variations on existing mechanisms, or remove mechanisms altogether, or completely remove the element of, like, say, the Triforce existing in some games. It doesn't even exist, etc., etc. That's what these games have historically, canonically done, and for a number of reasons, including different timelines, etc., etc. But what you can point to is certain elements which are always there. You always have a princess, you always have Link, you always have the Master Sword, you always have Ganon, and you always have those overarching themes of power, wisdom, and courage. And those are the core elements. And they're the things that are always there.
They're core
And
elements.
Puzzles hasn't gone away.
It kind of did.
Hang on. How did it go away? In Breath of the Wild? Well, okay, in Breath of the Wild, it was kind of it was a stupid way to do puzzles, but they were still there in Tears of the Kingdom. In fact, Tears of the Kingdom, I would say, changed the way that you approach puzzles. Instead of saying, hey, why don't we go through a linear path through a temple, it encouraged you to come up with your own way of doing it. There are people who speed run the entire game without gathering next to anything but a branch and going straight to Ganon and killing him without anything, or beating a temple in a way that most people hadn't thought of.
Don't you understand that that's a huge departure from the series? That the series has always been this linear progression, and that wouldn't even be possible in Twilight Princess, for instance. You can't even access the area you need to get to in order to get to Ganon in Twilight
because
Princess.
Because of technological limitations.
No, not technological limitations. Artistic decisions that limit the player's access to certain areas of the map, depending upon where you are in the story. That's what I mean. Okay, those aren't technical limitations. That was playing to the formula that has always been Zelda, which again, I keep getting back to this, that linear progression. So the fact that that's missing or at least less of a focus or hardly a focus at all in these big open world games, right? So many people have attested that going through just the side quests in these open world games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, is enough to really engage them. And in fact, doing the main quest is kind of frowned upon, sort of like how most people play Skyrim, right? You don't want to get to the end of the main quest because then the game ends. You'd rather explore all this side world shit. Well, in Zelda, it's not how it has ever really worked. It's more like I'm so engaged in this one giant overarching story that I want to see what happens next, and I have to continue to play that. That's the draw and the allure of it, which is conspicuously missing from these big open world games.
Okay, so my problem here is that sure, the previous games have far more linearity. I have no problem granting that, and you stay very focused on that linearity, and for a purpose. There's a purpose behind it. It's not just like throwaway. It's just for the heck of it. Although I guess in some cases, though, you could make that argument. But anyways, I generally agree with you. But here's the problem, and you yourself just said it. you're so focused on the overarching story that you don't know what world you're even trying to save. Your ability to be engaged with the world is super limited. Look at Link to the Past.
That's not true.
Exactly. The village in there is like it's super bare. It's barely a village. It's just a bunch of houses put together in a location. Like, why am I trying to save these people? Why do I really care about this? I don't. I care about getting to the end goal. I want to get the Master Sword because it's a requirement for me to beat Ganon, and then I have to go beat Ganon. That's it.
Okay,
you could remove the village from Link to the Past, and I bet you would still have the same amount of fun.
I don't think so. There's important elements in the village. Okay, like the book of Maduro. There's also some secrets that you could find if you want to try to get the heart pieces, which is something else that Link to the Past introduced, which ended up becoming a staple of the series afterward. Afterward was heart pieces. So there's important aspects of the village. You also learn a little bit more about the environment and the world by talking to people. Obviously, technical limitations are going to limit the amount of exposition that each character kind of puts out because it's a Super Nintendo, it's not a Switch. And yes, I still haven't questioned the idea that each iteration of the game pushes technological boundaries even further. They always do that. Nintendo's fantastic about doing that.
Okay. So then my argument is really that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom do diverge, but they're mostly consistent with the core elements. They're still puzzles.
Okay, so
you may not like how they are, but they're there.
Consistencies that you highlight are a poor substitution for what I would consider to be a good representation of the series. They feel like shoehorned in elements to a story that's about a different world. Does that make sense? I think so.
I understand what you're saying. Let's say that I don't, but for the sake of argument, let's say that I can see that. In my opening statement, I stated this, that people have a different opinion on what is the actual like definitive game that they would pick for this debate topic. And I'm sure you would agree that most people would have like a differing set of opinions, right? Everybody's played different set of games. Right. Now, if I was going to sit them down in front of one game and have the highest likelihood that a vast majority of people are going to find something in that one game that they can point to, that they've played to historically and say, there's that piece of the game. There's that bridge from, I think it was Twilight. There's the church. There's the little, like, the horses. There's the Master Sword, et cetera, et cetera. If you're going to try and capture as most people as possible from their point of view, I would say Tears of the Kingdom does that. It might not do every single point well, but it does a huge majority more than any other game before it. And
okay,
I have
what else?
Evidence to back me up.
Well, okay, let's hear your evidence before I try to counter it.
Okay.
If you want to.
All right. So in an interview, I had to go track these down. In an interview.
An interview is your evidence, huh? Okay.
Game Informer interview by Aonuma, who I can't remember.
We're just going to point at sales figures. That probably would have been enough. But
no, because I don't think sales figures are a good argument. That would be a pretty weak argument. You could attack me on that quite a bit. But in a Game Informer interview in 2017, Aonuma explained, for Breath of the Wild, we didn't just look at one past game. We look at what defined Zelda in each era, the exploration of Zelda 1, the storytelling of Ocarina, the side quests of Majora's Mask.
What is this person's position? Is this a PR representative?
Aonuma Nintendo. Let me do. He is a game designer, senior officer within the Japanese video game design. So he helped design Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Okay. In a GDC, I think that's Game Developer Conference talk in 2017, the developers of the game themselves stated that they had a Zelda formula checklist in order to make sure that they were consistent with the historical background of what made Zelda games, including
the linearity.
Well, I'm stating, though, that there was a thought that was put into it. And I think it's coming from the horse's mouth. The paraglider, for example, was inspired by the Deku Leaf, which a lot of people would know about. We have the Rivali's Gale, which is based on the boomerang, the shrines, the tech, even that stupid little tablet, as you call it, that existed in Link to the Past. What do you think you walked up to when you walk up to the little walls and it literally said it's one of those stone tablets and Sarah is telepathically talking to you through them? That's the tablet. It's not.
But that was a tool of an evil person. That's not the same thing.
But still, the concept, the mechanism is still there, and that's the point.
Humbug. It's not the same mechanism at all. I don't agree with that. I feel like that's just an excuse. And again, all of that just sounds like corporate public speak gobbledygook. Okay. What was I going to say? Is at the end of the day, all right. You can't deny the fact that some of the boundaries that they broke were through the gameplay loop, and that the gameplay loop in Breath of the Wild and in Tears of the Kingdom is unique among Zelda titles. Yeah, you have to concede that.
The gameplay loop among okay, so if you're talking about the puzzles, temples, shrines, yes, I would concede with that it broke the loop. Yes. And
but the progression being hooked into acquiring specific items as you progress through the story. Excuse me.
There are certain elements, there are certain shrines and puzzles and stuff that are extremely difficult to break without that progression. You can still do it, but you could make the same case for previous Zelda games where you could skirt around.
Not most of them.
But it's not foreign. It's not a foreign thing that it's never happened before. The gameplay loop,
it still remains true. It still remains true that this item progression being hooked into has been a staple of the series. So I mean, and you can see that the puzzles and stuff were unique. So even through those concessions, you've iterated that the most important aspects of a game are in fact different with these two iterations of the series. Yeah. So
they're at their core.
It's not a good representation.
At their core, I would concede that like breaking a temple or like a shrine in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is not like breaking a temple or a shrine in a lot of the previous games. But the way that you break it, though, is still fundamental to the game. For example, your hookshot example. Could you pick a game, any one of the Zelda games where you have a hookshot? You get the hookshot. Could you go back to some of the temples and some of the games and use the hookshot when you shouldn't have, and still go and work your way through the temple again if you wanted to, or do something different with the temple? Because you have the hookshot now.
That's the opposite of the point that I'm trying to make. Yes, it does open up secret areas that were previously inaccessible and previously visited temples. However, primarily what not having that item does is prevent progress. And yes, there are some games where you can work your way around that. You can use glitches sometimes in order to work your way around that. But it's obviously intended by the designers, and it's an artistic decision to stop your progress until you acquire that particular item.
Okay, well, then I would just go back to the fact that you are not required to have any specific item to finish your progress. Your progress is to defeat Ganon. That's your progress. It doesn't matter how many temples or shrines or whatever are available or what tool you use them. That's not the core element. It's still an element that gives you that feeling of your Link beating the game. But at the end of the day, it's the Master Sword, and it's the symbolisms of the courage and the Triforce things that get you to that end goal, regardless of how you get there, because you get there in a different way in almost every game.
Well, to some extent, it is somewhat different, but a lot of games harken back to very similar locations in previous iterations. For instance, Kakariko Village, like you said, that's one that iterates over and over again. The Goron town, there's always a Goron town, right? Near Death Mountain, right? That always happens. So on and so forth. These things are pivotal elements of the storytelling. And in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, some of those places are there, but the world is so foreignly, misshapen and changed, and there are so many other places that probably shouldn't be there in order for it to be a traditional Zelda game, that it feels like a totally different fucking game.
I don't agree that there's something there that shouldn't be there. You have sky, whatever the wind one is with the sky places. You have that. You have
that one shouldn't be there.
Why not?
That's one that shouldn't be there.
It's canonical.
From which game?
You might it's either Wind Waker or Skyward Sword. I can't remember which one. Where you're in the sky. You're literally in the sky. You spend your entire time in the sky. Yeah.
I didn't fucking play Skyward Sword.
There you go. Right. So that's canonical. Like you said, Zora's Domain, Goron City, etc. You have the underworld, which is just Link to the Past, Dark World, just underneath. That's it. It's a replica of the same world. It's just flipped upside down. You have the exact same concept. You have the concept of the mirror. You just go through the world.
That's not entirely true. Okay, in Link to the Past, several things change between the Dark World and the Light World, and actually
Same when you go underground.
changing between them. You said it was the same world.
It's the what would you call it? The landscape of the above world just replicated, like mirrored. That's it. But things, you're going to find things
That's
underground that you're not going to find up there,
That's
and
not
vice
what-
versa.
That's not what the Dark World is in Link to the Past. In the Dark World, Link to the Past, the actual geography is different, and the places that you can visit are totally fucking different. It is like, and the world is now populated by super baddie fucking enemies. I think that's true of Tears of the Kingdom though as well. So,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you find some of the hardest bosses down there.
like traversing the world is necessary though, in order to get to certain places in the overworld and Link to the Past. You have to go to the Dark World and then come back. And
Same with Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, that's not true. That's not what I read. That's not what I read at all. People were saying that it's basically just a replication of the overworld, except it's dark and then there's harder enemies. That's what
There's certain things that you cannot do in the underworld until you progress the story to a certain point.
Okay, so that's not the same thing though. So it's like we're talking past each other again. Like it's literally a mechanic for traversing geography in LTTP.
So you're thinking of it as like a physical blocker as opposed to a story-based blocker. Okay, so but in a way, it is a physical blocker, because if you don't progress the story enough, there are certain things that you are physically blocked from getting into or accessing or completing.
That's like saying like, oh man, that's like saying, you know, I'm an American because I live on the North American continent. I'm not Canadian, even though you are.
Difference
Canadian.
Between a story blocker and an item blocker, you're blocked either way. Why does it matter which one is which?
Because what I'm talking about is something that's environmental. What you're talking about is something that's progression. Those are two completely different striations.
No, I'm talking about an integration. No, you're restricting yourself to, you must have a thing in order to move forward. And I'm saying that the thing is part of the environment which helps you move forward. It's an integration of all these ideas packaged into one. It's not just go get a thing. It's that the thing has some like connection to the environment around you, which is what Link does in every game. He adapts to his environment and then ultimately gets the core stuff and beats Ganon.
You got to calm down, man. You got to calm down. Quit spurging out. Okay. Let me respond.
No. Listen, no. Let me interrupt you some more, damn it.
Shit, fair. What was I going to say?
Hey, listen.
There it is. That's a good one. Somebody was saying something about Navi in my chat too. Yeah. But what was I going to say? No. It's like I say, what I'm talking about is something that's a physical, environmental, so you have to stand on this one particular spot, change into the dark world, then walk to another spot around a new set of, geographic barriers, and then change back to the overworld. And now you're in a place that was previously inaccessible just by going through those transitions and traversing that previously untraversable land. So that's what I mean. I think what you're talking about is, certain things become available as you progress through the story in the overworld and the underworld. And you need certain items in order to progress. So that's what I mean. That's the difference between the environmental and the progression, being the block. Okay. So I think I clarified that.
Yeah, you did. Okay. I understand the difference. I disagree with the importance of the difference as in terms of making it a Zelda game. I would say that you could have a mixture of all of these things and you could still walk away thinking, hey, I played a Zelda game. But the thing is that the execution of the underworld in Tears of the Kingdom reminds me more of the underworld that was in Skyrim than it does of the Dark World in LTTP. I guess. Does that make sense? Maybe that's why I'm criticizing it. I can see that argument, yeah. And I would point to the history of Zelda taking the same themes, including, even to your point, things, taking the same hook shot and altering the way it works in certain games. Not every game, but in certain games, the hook shot works a little bit differently. You need to upgrade it in some games, and in other games you don't. Boomerang, arrow, like all of these things change based on the game and environment, and Zelda is not foreign to changing the theme or the way that a core concept is being used. And I would say that Tears of the Kingdom is no different. It took the theme of the Dark World and Link to the Past, and it maintained the theme, but it changed how you interacted with that theme. But the theme is there. That theme of killing Ganon is there. All those themes are all there.
Some themes are, I will agree, but again, when we come to the Dark World thing, it's less like the Dark World in LTTP and more like the Dark World in Skyrim. I feel like it's more inspired by other series than it is of previous iterations of Zelda. So that's why I don't like that example there. When it comes to the things that they do get right, okay, Ganon being in the game, the Master Sword being in the game, Link being in the game, Zelda being in the game. Again, I feel like these are a small pittance of what should be, a much more grandiose story about how Link goes from being nothing into being something, and that progression should be iterated out rather than what seems to be presented to me. And I haven't spent a lot of time playing Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, I'll be honest, but what seems to me to be presented there is that there's this big wide open world, and you sort of go to different places and interact with different cultures in order to do well for them, but it doesn't particularly matter what order or pathway that you take in order to do that, and there isn't a very good clear progression along the way, and I think that's a huge failing as well. There's the missing the missing mechanics, man. I gotta have the hook shot to get through the fire temple, I gotta have the iron boots to get through the water temple, that kind of stuff.
Okay Well, then with the last few minutes, then I'll go to my last real point on this then. Can you agree that whether Link has or doesn't have particular items, that's kind of, we're just, I'll cede it for the argument. He has to have a hook shot or whatever. One thing he cannot be without at all is the Master Sword. He must have the Master Sword.
I accept that that's one of the most important things, but I think more than just a Master Sword makes Link. It's not just the Master Sword, it's also the tool belt, in my opinion.
Okay, let's say we go with that for sake of argument. Why does he need the Master Sword? Can you explain that to me?
Well, to kill Ganon, like you said.
Why?
Well, because Ganon is the embodiment of evil in the world, and Link's job is to save the world.
So that's it. So why does he need the Master Sword versus a regular sword?
It's a MacGuffin. I don't know.
Yeah. So Tears of the Kingdom is the only video game in the entire franchise that fully explains the history of the Master Sword, including the timeline and why so many timelines converge. And I mean timelines as in like previous games, why they converge on Tears of the Kingdom. It is the only game you're going to get that literally goes back in time. It's the link to the past as to why the Master Sword must exist in every other game. It is fully fleshed out. It explains the mechanism of the sword. It explains where the sword comes from, how it was created, why it arises the way it does, why it takes time or doesn't take time, why Link is the only one that can wield it, and Link has to go through the same kind of trials to wield the Master Sword in Tears of the Kingdom as he does in most other games to wield the Master Sword. It is one of the most critical components that literally no other game goes into as much depth, and not even close, as Tears of the Kingdom. And you have a fundamental missing aspect, kind of going back to Link to the Past. You're wandering around in this world, and all you're thinking is, me must kill Ganon, and you don't really know why, or how the Master Sword works, or why Zelda is the way she is, etc.
That's not fucking true at all, okay? In Link to the Past, the very first thing you do is you get a telepathic message from Princess Zelda that she must be saved from the castle or whatever. Then your uncle goes out in order to fucking do it. No, actually, not with the Master Sword. So your uncle goes out and does it, and then he ends up getting killed. You save Zelda, and then where do you escape to? You escape to a church. Which is a full standing actual pews and stained glass windows church with a cross on the top of it and everything. It's actually a fucking church. Then you are explained to by the preacher that, this is someone is trying to resurrect Ganon. You have to stop him. And then you're beset on your quest. Then you are beset on your quest in order to stop the evil force of Ganon, which is this demon from the Netherrealm.
Where's the Netherrealm? Why does the Netherrealm? See, this is the problem: is that no game goes into the lore of these things.
Well, the other aspect of it is you're saying that you're just fucking thrust into it. Again, part of this goes down to the technological limitations of the console at the time, and further iterations.
You can tell a story.
It
Oh,
does
come
get more
on.
and more iterated upon. It does get more and more fleshed out. However, it's not just thrust upon you. You're not just going to kill the bad guy. It's explained that these people are of an evil ilk and that all the monsters running around are their fault. So you have to go
What a
kill them in order to
leftist. It's
stop the
bad
monsters.
because it's bad.
At the end of the
it's
day,
bad,
what you're saying, is that the master, the one game that does the one thing that no other game did is the best representation of the series, is what you're trying to pull off here, and it doesn't fucking fly. At the end of the day, part of what makes Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom a bad representation of the series is all of the departures that it engages with in order to make itself special and apart from the previous iterations of the series. The one thing that you're pointing out, all of this backstory behind what the Master Sword is and that and the other, always remained a mystery in previous games, because it was intended to be this aura of mystery as well as righteousness, right? A mysterious righteousness. That's part of what makes Link who Link is in all of the games, is this mysterious righteousness that isn't very well fleshed out. And by diving into that exposition and explaining it so completely, I think that the storytelling in Tears of the Kingdom has watered down the lore just a little bit. And sort of made it into like an anime sort of estimation of what it was. It was always, in everybody's minds, which was this grand, tale that extended far beyond what you were presented with in the game. You could use your imagination. Oh, God forbid that we do that in 2025 in order to sort of expand on it and understand it in your own way, which was another staple of the series.
I think what happened in Tears of the Kingdom is that it opened the door. It didn't close the door on anything. It allowed you to make sense of almost every game in the history of Zelda, and it allows for further games to continue to exist in exactly the same way as they have
when it doesn't have half the shit that all the other games had. I mean, that's
because
bullshit.
It doesn't need to make that true. These things are not mutually exclusive.
I disagree. No, there you go.
EOD doesn't have a soul. He sucks.
Canada's not a real country. We're gonna invade. It's gonna become the 51st state.
Of course.
The fucking Lost Woods.
Damn, that's what this debate felt like, huh?
I had to end it on that. That is gonna wrap up the open portion of the back and forth of the debate. Yeah, whenever you're ready, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Okay, so I just want to thank one more time probably the viewers who suffered the most watching this, but EOD and SpeakeaZy, you guys are awesome. Thank you for having this debate. It was great. I will say this in closing. I think what EOD did was he leaned a little bit on nostalgia, on his perspective on what makes a Zelda game great, and heavily on the things within the game. And I was trying to lean on the concepts, because the one thing that is consistent between every single Zelda game is the concepts. The one thing that is not consistent between every single Zelda game is the thing. And so, for example, to his point, he conceded that the Christian iconography was not consistent. A lot of the weaponry, not consistent. Even the way that you approach certain puzzles, temples, etc., not consistent in terms of their execution. But you could make a case for the concepts, which he did. He made a concept argument for having puzzles to begin with, having a temple or temples to begin with, fighting Ganon, etc., even having weapons beyond the Master Sword. These are concepts that are not tied to their execution, and the history of the franchise bears that out to be true. Now, there is some consistency between games in terms of certain elements within there, but these are niche arguments. They're not overlapping arguments. And the prompt states the franchise as a whole. And if you're looking at the franchise as a whole, then you have to look at the things that are consistent as a whole and that are not consistent as a whole, and where you can draw those parallels to something that best represents that. And I think I laid my case out reasonably enough that, in particular, maybe not so much Breath of the Wild, because I'm not the biggest fan of Breath of the Wild, but it's linked in with Tears of the Kingdom. So I have to kind of, unfortunately for me, it's an uphill slog. But Tears of the Kingdom, it was literally meant to take the history of the franchise and take some element of it that is consistent with that history and bring it into the game. And it is the only game which goes comprehensively and thoroughly into that lore, into why does the Master Sword exist? How does it work, etc. What about Ganon? What about the overarching concepts of good and evil, and how time plays into that, the reason why you get different timelines, the reason why Zelda comes from a long line of a particular lineage, etc., etc. You even have Cass in Breath of the Wild, to give Breath of the Wild some due. That's that pair, like the bird thing that does the whatever that musical instrument is. He makes direct references to previous games. This isn't just something I'm coming up with off the top of my head. It's literally stated by the creators of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and it's referenced multiple previous games that are not Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. In fact, there's even a reference to, I believe there's some reference to the war of, I don't know, there was some capturing War of Ganon or whatever. That's a direct reference to Link to the Past. That's the point of Tears of the Kingdom. And that's why my statement is that if you take anybody who's anybody, whether they've played the game before or not, but especially if they played the game, let them sit through a full playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom, and they're going to find at least one thing, if not multiple things, where they're going to go, I remember I did something very, very similar, or this is exactly what I remember from a previous game. You cannot say that about other games in the franchise, most other games in the franchise. For example, it's really hard for you to say, Ocarina of Time, I remember this thing from Link to the Past, unless you're talking about the stuff that I'm talking about, which is what? The core concepts, the Master Sword, Ganon, etc., etc. And to my point, Ocarina of Time simply further expands on the previous history of Zelda games, as do most other Zelda games. They expand more on the history of them. It's just that Tears of the Kingdom is the most comprehensive, ties most, if not all of them together, and gives you a reason for why there's disparity. So in my opinion, Tears of the Kingdom actually makes the case for why the randomness, anything you could point to within any Zelda game that's not the same as other Zelda games, Tears of the Kingdom actually explains that, whereas no other Zelda game explains that. So you can go back to any game and go, oh, because I played Tears of the Kingdom, I now understand why this thing isn't, why Ocarina of Time does this thing differently than Link to the Past, beyond just technical limitations and whatnot. There's no other game that does that. So in conclusion, EOD sucks. He was a great opponent, but he sucks. He's a right-wing, far-right conservative. He probably believes that the Earth is flat and that Link will fall off the edge if he walks too far, walks off the boundary of the plane of Hyrule or something. Blah blah blah. All right, that's it for me.
You opened a secret door there.
All right. Thank you for that closing statement, Spyro. And with that, we're going to hand over the mic to EOD. Yeah, I think that was a chest you opened. I don't know what happened. But we're going to hand the mic over here to EOD 696 for your closing statement. And whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer up with your voice.
Right now. Okay, so here's what I'm going to start with. Okay, Canada's not a real country. Learn to say about what the hell you Canuck son of a bitch. What else was I going to say? It's right. So, one of the things. Let's remember what the prompt is before I continue here. Okay, the prompt is which Legend of Zelda game best represents the franchise. And what my opponent is trying to do is trying to say that there's this that separates Tears of the Kingdom. There's that separates Tears of the Kingdom, but it makes all these callbacks. I promise you that, you know, the guy with the wings that never appeared in any other game, with the musical thing that never appeared in any other game, said something about Link to the Past. I'm telling you, it's in there, but he can't actually give us any real examples. He points to a plethora of examples, but can't give us any. And throughout this debate, I've provided evidence after evidence after evidence, demonstrating how every single Zelda game since Link to the Past has iterated upon the formula of Link to the Past in order to be a Zelda game. That's part of the staples of the series. When I sit down to play a Zelda game, there are certain expectations that I have. There is a certain amount of the tool belt that I expect to see. There is the Master Sword that I expect to see. There is Ganondorf. There is Zelda. But what Tears of the Kingdom, which my opponent has admitted shamelessly does, is instead of having Hyrule Field and Hyrule Castle and all these places that are familiar and something that we can harken back to and say that this is a Zelda game. It departs in huge ways. My opponent did nothing to explain to us why the inventory system is so grossly different, why the game loop has gone from being this linear legendary path from starting out as nobody and becoming the hero of time, becoming the hero of the world, why that seems to be at least muted, if not even present at all in Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild. Instead, we're presented with this huge open world where gathering raw materials and building things and constructing our own weapons and our own armor is the rule of your progression right there. And as you proceed through these games, they just don't feel like Zelda at all. Which makes them a terrible representation of the series on the whole. That's why I chose the foundational LTTP, as my opponent so rightfully pointed out early on, that there's many tropes within it that make it that have made Zelda ever since 1991 when LTTP came out, and that these were all defined within LTTP on the Super Nintendo with this fantastic iteration of the game, which is still perfectly playable and interesting and good today. I highly recommend everybody go check it out. One of the things my opponent asked is, which game would you set a person down in front of in order to, sort of express the best of the series? And you want to do one that's not unique, that doesn't depart in huge ways from the series in order to appropriately represent the series. Again, the Tears of the Kingdom's not a bad game. Breath of the Wild's not a bad game. They're fine games. They look awesome. They play great. The Switch is a fantastic piece of hardware, if you like playing games on a cell phone. But at the end of the day, it's not a Zelda game. That's been my main contention, and I really don't think that's been very well contended with. What did my opponent say to this? Is that, it's got Ganon in it, it's got Zelda in it, it's got the Master Sword in it, so it must be a Zelda game. No, that's not all that makes a Zelda game. Again, it's got to have that legendary progression system, and all of that always hooks into acquiring specific items as you proceed through the dungeons. And these mechanics, these core elements of every Zelda game that were originally established in Link to the Past, are conspicuously missing from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But yeah, okay, so if we want to chuggle syrup all day and be a lumberjack, definitely support the Canadian, and we could say a boot and all that. If you want to make Canada the 51st state, let's fucking go! Vote for me. All right, so yeah, that's it. That's all I got. That's opening the chest right there.
There we go. There we go. If you are enjoying what you have seen here tonight, make sure you subscribe to the SpeakeaZy channel so you don't miss more debates just like this one every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.